Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the first online lesson that I'm going to try in flipping the classroom. We're going to see how this works, right? Remember, we're just going to give it a shot and I'll get feedback from you guys and we will see how you feel about this system. Okay, I feel like, with this you can fast forward through me, you can rewind, and you can pause whenever you need to, unlike in the classroom. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Chapter 8.1, which is photosynthesis. Now, before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of photosynthesis and talk about all of the details and everything, we need to understand a few things. And we're going to start off by looking at the anatomy of a plant. Okay, here's my crude drawing of a plant. Okay, forgive my Photoshop skills. The first basic structure that we're going to talk about are the roots. Okay, the roots are the parts of the plant that are underneath the ground, and their function is to pull up water and minerals and nutrients from the soil. The stems are the next part of the plant that is basic to a plant anatomy, and they pretty much transport that material that's pulled up by the roots so that it can get to the rest of the plant. We have flowers, which are the reproductive structures in a plant, and then we have leaves. Now, the leaves are going to be uber important for our for understanding photosynthesis, basically. Most of what happens during photosynthesis is going to happen in the leaves. Now, when we talk about the leaves, we have to talk about the underside of it. Okay, there are specialized cells underneath your leaves called guard cells. And these guard cells are very important because they open and close to allow a gas exchange, almost like how we breathe in and out. Okay, we breathe in oxygen and then we breathe out carbon dioxide. A plant is going to breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. Okay, but this isn't really called breathing. I'm just using it as an example to show you or to illustrate how the guard cells work. Again, it's going to exchange carbon dioxide and water. These guard cells are found underneath the leaves, and when they open and close, the hole that's created is called the stomata. Okay, just like how your lips need to open and close in order for you to talk or breathe, and the opening, is called the mouth, right? So you have your lips, i.e. the guard cells, and then you have your mouth, which is the stomata. Okay, so let's look at this structure. This is your basic stomata. Okay, the two hot dog looking things or lip looking things on the outside, those are your stomata. Those are your guard cells. The opening in the middle that looks kind of like a mouth is called the stomata. Okay, so again, guard cells on the outside, there's two of them for each stomata, and the opening is called the stomata itself. Okay. Now, while this allows the plant to exchange gases that are necessary in photosynthesis, one of the drawbacks, one of the problems that this causes is that sometimes when the stomata are open during the daytime, when it's super hot, it's going to cause water to seep out. Okay, this is called transpiration. Okay, transpiration, transpiration. And water is very important for the plant. So if the plant loses too much water, it runs the risk of losing its structure and basically dying. Okay, so we'll talk about why that's important in a little bit. Moving from the leaves, we're going to go into the stems. Now, there are two very important structures in the stems. They are the xylem and the phloem. Okay, so here is my little plant again, and I've cut a little section from it. This is what it illustrates, and if you zoom in on it, you're going to see this basic structure. Okay, this is the bark around the outside, or the skin on the outside of the stem. And in the very middle, you're going to find all of what's called the vascular tissue. Vascular tissue is any kind of tissue that moves materials, especially liquids, okay, throughout the plant or whatever. The xylem is going to be found right in the center of everything. Okay, these cells help to bring water from the ground into the leaves, so they're going to travel all the way from the roots through the stems into the leaves to help bring that water that is so necessary for plant growth and development. Okay, and it's also very, very important for photosynthesis. The phloem are basically these little purple dots that you see right here, just on the outside of the xylem, and they help to transport sugars and other nutrients to the plant. Okay, so if the plant is bringing up nutrients from the roots, these phloem help to move those around as well. And when photosynthesis has taken place in the leaves, okay, the sugar from the leaves are going to travel through the phloem to the rest of the cells, the plant, so that other cells can use it for energy. Inside of your plant cells, remember, are very small organelles called chloroplasts. And they are super important, these chloroplasts, because it's where photosynthesis is going to take place. Okay, and this is just a quick review. Let's look at the structure of a chloroplast. Now, I know I talked about this before, but we're going to review it again just for those of us who do not remember it very well. Okay, so remember the chloroplast has a double membrane. That means it has one outer membrane and then an inner membrane that makes its structure. Inside of the double membrane is liquid, and that liquid space is called the stroma. Just like how inside of your cell membrane you have cytoplasm, right? Inside of your chloroplast you have stroma. These little green, flat, pancake-looking things are called thylakoids. Okay, thylakoids are super important. That's where half of photosynthesis is going to take place. The other half takes place in the stroma. Okay, but the first half is going to take place in the thylakoid. They contain that pigment, chlorophyll, that makes plants green. If you have a stack of thylakoids, okay, like a whole stack of them like this, that is called a granum. Okay? So that is your basic structure of the chloroplast that we've talked about before, but we're just going to review. Right? So here's the equation for photosynthesis. 6CO2 plus 6H2O in the presence of light, or with the help of light, however you want to say it, gives you C6H12O6 plus 6O2. Now, what in the world does that mean? So here in plain English, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, which is the stuff that we breathe out, right, CO2, is going to combine with 6 molecules of water, 6H2O, to make sugar, C6H12O6, remember we talked about this before, and 6 molecules of oxygen. Okay, all of this is going to be powered by sunlight. Okay, sunlight is what's going to give all of the energy in order to power photosynthesis so that plants can make sugars. Again, the word photosynthesis means to make with light. Right? Photo means light, synthesis means to make. So what are we using? We are using light. Why light? Because light is the energy that we need to make what? We're making sugar, C6H12O6. Okay. Now there are 2 parts to photosynthesis. Oops. Forgot to animate that. I'm sorry. Now there are 2 parts to photosynthesis. Okay, the first part is called the light reactions. So you can tell it needs light. Okay, that's why it's called the light reactions. And the second one is called the Calvin cycle, or the light independent reactions. Okay, this means that the Calvin cycle, since it's independent of light, doesn't necessarily need light directly in order to work. And we'll talk about what that means later. So first and foremost, we're going to concentrate on the light reactions. It's going to happen in those thylakoid membranes. Okay, those chlorophyll molecules, those little green pigments, are going to play a huge role when it comes to capturing the sunlight in these thylakoid membranes. Okay, again, this is the part that captures this light from the sun. It's going to use water as well as light in order to make ATP, oxygen, and NADPH. Okay, we've talked about ATP a little bit before, but we're going to review that again in just a little. Oxygen is a gas. It's that molecule that we need in order to breathe. And NADPH is what's known as an electron carrier, and we'll go into more detail about that in a little bit as well. Okay, like the second part of the of photosynthesis is what's called the Calvin cycle, or the light-independent reactions. It's going to take place in the stroma, where there are no pigments to pick up the light. Okay, so this is light independent. It doesn't directly need the sunlight in order to work. So instead of using the sun for energy, it's going to use the ATP and the NADPH that was made during the light reactions, okay, in order to turn carbon dioxide into sugar. Okay, so the Calvin cycle is the part where we'll actually start to use the carbon dioxide that's being brought in through those stomata. Okay, so what exactly is ATP and NADPH? We talked about all the other parts many times. Okay, we know that light is basically the light from the sun. We understand that water comes from the soil. We know what water is. You guys hopefully know what carbon dioxide is and oxygen. But what exactly is ATP and NADPH? Okay, ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is what your cells use for energy. Okay, so ATP is a chemical compound. It's made of an adenine, a 5-carbon sugar, which is called ribose, and 3 phosphate groups. Okay, this is why adenosine triphosphate is named like that. It has 3, which is tri-phosphates. Okay, adenosine triphosphates. Now, the energy that is found in ATP is actually stored in the bonds between the 3 phosphate groups. Okay, to use the energy, all the cell has to do is break one of the bonds, and it's usually between the 2nd and the 3rd phosphate, and I'll show that to you in the next slide. Okay, once that happens, adenosine triphosphate is going to lose one of its phosphate because you've cut the bond. Okay, and it becomes adenosine diphosphate. Again, it's because it's lost one of its phosphate. Tri means 3, di means 2. Now, ADP can be reused. Okay, your cell likes to recycle and reduce and reuse and all that good stuff because it saves it a lot of effort and a lot of energy in the long run. So that ADP, just because it's lost a phosphate, doesn't mean it can no longer be used. It can still be used. All it needs to do, okay, all the cell needs to do in order to make that ADP usable again is to attach a new phosphate to it. Okay, and we'll talk about that when we talk more about cellular respiration in the next chapter. Okay, so again, this is your ATP molecule. The highest energy bond that you're going to find is between phosphate number 2 and phosphate number 3. Okay, so when the cell needs energy, it's going to cut this bond right here between phosphate 2 and phosphate 3. Okay, doing so is going to cause one of the phosphates to fall off, and that is how your cell gets energy. Now, this ATP is now ADP because you only have 2 phosphate groups. Okay, that 3rd phosphate is now gone. That doesn't mean it's not reusable. Again, if we just reattach that 3rd phosphate, it should be usable as energy again. Okay, last thing we'll talk about, NADPH. Now, NADPH is a brand new molecule that we've never talked about in class before. Okay, you don't necessarily need to know what each of these letters mean. Just understand that it's called NADPH. It's what's known as an electron carrier. Okay, just as the name suggests, it carries electrons. So in the light reactions, and we'll go into more details about this later, but in the light reaction, when light enters the chloroplast and hits the chlorophyll molecules, the electrons are going to be excited by all that new energy that it just got. These energized electrons are going to jump around like it was just high on sugar, and it's going to attach itself or get attached to an NADPH molecule. The NADPH then carries those electrons, hence electron carrier, to the Calvin cycle to help power some of the processes. Okay, I like to think of it as Ash Ketchum with all of his Pikachus. Okay, let's pretend like he had more than one, right? So Ash Ketchum is like an electron carrier. He takes the energy, right, inside of the Pikachus, let's say, because they are an electric Pokemon, and he carries them around so that it can be used for different things, right? So NADPH is an electron carrier. It's going to take those excited electrons from the light reactions and carry it to the Calvin cycle. Okay, because the Calvin cycle, remember, doesn't use light, so it needs energy somehow. That energy is brought by NADPH and ATP. Okay. Next one, we're going to cover more detail into photosynthesis and the light reactions, but that's it for today. Thank you.